Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking from Washington, D.C., and the world picture this week takes the form of war and depression. Depression and war. It used to be said that Roosevelt had not put an end to the Depression, but the war did it. But now this is proven wrong because Bush and now Obama have been able to combine the two, war and depression. If you don't have the right policies, you'll lose the war and still have the depression. And that's what's happening here in the United States. Now, the two competing foci of attention would be the growing pessimism, the growing harbingers of some kind of a new financial crash or financial panic coming out of Europe, coming out of the United States, but also now coming from lowering levels of industrial production around the world, even reaching into various people who say that there's now a slowdown going on in China. That's one side. The other side, of course, the continuing confrontation of the United States on the one side and China and Pakistan on the other. Maybe we just start off with a headline here. The growing acrimony of the clash between the U.S. and China. We'll get to this in future segments in this program, but we have this interesting newspaper, the China Youth Daily. The China Youth Daily is now the vehicle for a series of warnings by the Chinese military forces this week, accusing the United States of waging a worldwide internet war to bring down governments across the world. This takes up the themes that we had at the beginning of 2010, the clash between China and Google. And remember, when I say Google, I'm saying the National Security Agency. The NSA and Google are now Siamese twins. That was a headline in the Wall Street Journal, so everybody in the world has to know that Google equals NSA. Now, the people who are speaking are scholars of the Academy of Military Sciences. We're talking about Ye Zheng and Zhao Biuxian, and they accuse the United States of massive interference in the internal affairs of other countries. And I quote, "Of late, an internet tornado has swept across the world, massively impacting and shocking the globe. Behind all this lies the shadow of America," write the scholars from the Chinese Academy of Military Sciences. New quote, "Faced with this warm-up for an internet war, every nation and every military can no longer be passive, but is making preparations to fight the internet war." And they compare the internet war to the nuclear confrontations of the recent past and their recommendations. China needs to, quote, "express to the world its principled stance of maintaining an internet border, and protecting its internet sovereignty. China must unite all advanced forces to dive into the raging torrent of the age of the peaceful use of the internet and return the internet to a healthy, orderly environment." And what they're talking about, of course, is the Great Firewall of China, which the CIA, with the help of Falun Gong, and of course WikiLeaks. This was the original reason that the CIA invented WikiLeaks, created it, made it, assembled it, deployed it. CIA deployed WikiLeaks because originally, as Cass Sunstein told us, the new Wiki world was going to be a series of cyber attacks on China. So this has to be taken seriously, and the reason, of course, is that this is now about 2.5 weeks after the famous Chinese ultimatum to the United States delivered during the U.S.-Chinese strategic dialogue. Any attack by the United States on Pakistan will be interpreted by China as an attack on China. And now we're getting the expanded definition of what this attack is. It's not just a military attack or an armed attack, but now getting into this area of destabilizations, because this, of course, is the methodology of the infamous color revolutions, the CIA people power coups, the model refurbished most recently in Belgrade in 2000 to bring down the Milosevic regime, but then, as the decade has progressed, integrating more and more elements of cyber warfare, Google, Internet, engines of the same type, but then, of course, the Twitter, the Facebook, and the rest of it. So this is what the Chinese are warning about. Now, they're absolutely aware. Maybe they've been reading Obama, the Postmodern Coup, The Making of a Manchurian Candidate. If you haven't read it, you better read it right now and fast. This book now, more than 3 years ago, with a heavy emphasis on, as the name implies, the postmodern coup, the people power coup, the CIA color revolution, the Albert Einstein Institute, Gene Sharp, Colonel Robert Helvey, the entire methodology being used, right, from Kiev and Tiflis, Georgia, all the way now to Thailand and Burma. CIA attempting to gin up color revolutions in Thailand and Burma as to create more problems for China. So the Chinese are very much aware of it, and they're calling this to world attention. So we've got a climate of this rising acrimony. Now, Google has said that the Chinese are launching hack attacks on the email accounts and other supposedly private locations on the internet that have to do with democracy activists. Well, the democracy activists in this case are usually funded by the Soros Foundation, and they march to the tune of the CIA. It would be interesting to do an in-depth study in that. So the accusation coming from the U.S. side, from Google, from the National Security Agency, in effect, is that it all comes from Jinan in China. And in particular, it comes from a specific institution that they are now attempting to target. This is known as the Shandong Jinan Lanxiang Vestibule School. Shandong in the older romanization. So the Shandong Jinan Lanxiang Vestibule School is a vocational school that teaches computer training, and the CIA NSA line is that that's the source. They're supposedly the place that has the largest number of registered internet users of anywhere in the world. And we're hearing all this from Eric Schmidt, the very spooky chairman of Google. And he says that Google is more than capable of defeating these Chinese attacks. So this looks ugly. And remember, the ultimatum has to be interpreted in the following way. If China says any attack by the United States on Pakistan will be interpreted by China as an attack on Pakistan, what other means of retaliation? Well, there are missiles. There is the Taiwan Strait. There are all kinds of sort of military and other arenas in which this could occur. But one of the obvious ones is some combination of finance and the internet. The finance, of course, is that the Chinese arsenal does contain these $2 trillion U.S. dollars. Now, of course, it's a weapon whose use also would tend to harm the user, but it's there, and it's simply stirring up a little bit of fear about this could go a very, very long way. And then you have the internet, right, where the Chinese, of course, are the greatest power in the world. The number of internet users, I believe, has long since exceeded any other country. So this is now July 1914. This is a climate of growing acrimony and tension between these two great powers, the United States and China. And the impulse, of course, is coming from the lunatic adventurism of the CIA and the Obama administration. We'll be back in just a minute.